A new exhibit at the Holocaust Museum in Washington is opening Jewish diaries and archives that were hidden from the Nazis in World War II. The exhibit tells the story of the Jews of Kovno in Lithuania on the Baltic Sea. There were about 40,000 Jews there before 1940. Refugees running from the Nazis swelled that population to about 250,000. Then the Nazis invaded Lithuania. The Jews fought back in a remarkable show of defiance. Thousands were killed. Others were sent to concentration camps. But the resistors kept their diaries, their photographs, and their drawings to keep their history alive. Here's how that story is being told at the museum.
As tropas alemãs progridem na região de Kovno.
Most unbelievable things happened. Things that were thought impossible really happened. And you started to be very fearful of everything.
We refer to ghettos as places of concentration where the Jewish populations are brought in from the countryside.
In a place where about 8,000 to 10,000 people lived, 30,000 have to live.
They are not free people. They are worked. They're either held before they're deported to death camps, or in the case of the Kovno ghetto, they are worked. They are simply a slave labor force.
I remember that my first drawings were in the bread line. Every day we stood for hours and hours and hours to get our bread ration. Standing there in the line, I did some sketches.
She began painting and sketching on her own, but then she was recruited by Avraham Tori and the Ältestenrat, the Jewish Council.
He was a statistician and a collector, and he wanted me to do some important places where things had taken place.
I went out from the point of view that no one of us will survive. So we must leave some paper or document that people after us can read and learn what happened in the ghetto.
Esther Laurie was instructed, in the absence of photographs, in the absence of any other kind of documentation, she was asked by Avraham Tori to sketch these places. Really what she was doing was creating a form of documentation through the medium of the expression of art.
There is a picture depicting the raid of a potato field by a crowd. And the crowd started to raid those potato fields, even if the potatoes were not yet ripe. The Germans used to shoot into them, but it didn't help. They assembled again and again to get some potatoes. Some figures desperately try to quickly get something out of the earth.
You have so many different ways of documenting one event. George Cadiz took his photographs clandestinely, he took them secretly. He had a couple of cameras. One he actually took photographs through a buttonhole. This is a man who was sort of acting as a loner, but who's provided us really with one of the most thorough photographic documentations that exists, again, in this history of the Holocaust. He records everything from going into being rounded up and going into the ghetto, the day-to-day life of the ghetto itself. But he was doing this right under the eyes of the Germans in secret. And he succeeded in a magnificent way. Avraham Tori oversaw the creation and the gathering and then the deposit of materials which became a huge collection which he buried underneath the ghetto, and it survived, these materials survived the destruction of the ghetto.
I was close to the events, and that's why I could really know what's going on in the ghetto, and I put it down every evening, every night.
So you have a daily record which is kept by him on his own, at risk, great risk. If he'd been known to keep this, he would have been shot.
12,199 victims of actions in the ghetto, 336 victims of individual murders, 646 deported or died slow deaths, only 230 buried in the Jewish grave in the ghetto.
People were destroyed, but their history, I mean, this is this ultimate act of defiance, I think, is that history remains.
Very nice. So look at the Holocaust Museum exhibit on the resistance of the Jews of
In tonight's Viewer's Choice segment, your 4 options are what the flurry of big mergers means to you, the consumer, the famous name behind a 32-year-old secret of a college prank involving a cow, a boatload of Haitians is chased and rammed by a Coast Guard ship, and a special exhibit of the remarkable anti-Nazi artifacts from Lithuania's Kovno ghetto. And your choice tonight is the story of the Kovno ghetto. During the 3-year life of Lithuania's Kovno ghetto, members of the Jewish population there engaged in remarkable acts of defiance. CNN's Kyoko Altman has their story.
A secret diary documents the blood shed by innocent victims. A forbidden photograph captures the word revenge scrawled in blood. Sketches, albums, letters, part of a new exhibit at the Holocaust Museum. An extraordinary record of Nazi atrocities compiled at the height of World War II by residents of Kovno, a Jewish ghetto in Lithuania. 84-year-old Esther Laurie was one of many Kovno Jews who risked their lives to chronicle their ordeal. She created more than 200 drawings and paintings and buried most in ceramic jars, determined that the world know what happened.
It was not safe to keep them. It was very dangerous that they fall in German hands. There was not much hope for survival.
She drew this frantically as she and thousands of other Kovno Jews were being deported to a labor camp in Estonia. Many of the photos here were taken by a photographer who hid a camera under his overcoat. He snapped pictures through a buttonhole and buried the prints in a milk can under his house. Renee Gadiel's husband counted victims on this memorial plaque. Men, women, children, including at least 12,000 who were executed. Of the more than 35,000 Kovno Jews at the beginning of the war, only an estimated 3,000 survived.
How could I have survived? I don't believe it. I still dream that the Nazis are chasing me.
In this letter, a father who thought he too was about to be killed by the Germans writes to his children, "I was standing in their presence as they were sending many thousands of men and women and children to be butchered. I am your loving father to my very last breath." Kyoko Altman, CNN, Washington.